Hello and welcome to Bytesize Newscast number 5. Alright, today's topics include Andrew Yang. Is he going to be the new Secretary of Commerce? And if so, what can we learn about his influence on the future of crypto? Kim Han Solo, not to be confused with Star Wars' Han Solo, is taken into custody by the CIA. This could have some real geopolitical results. And the undo button comes to Ethereum. What is it and how does it work? Then we'll dive into some China tech. You guys all know about 5G, right? So let's have a look at China, who's working on 6G, which is pretty exciting stuff. Finally, the president of China, Xi, has halted Jack Ma's Ant IPO. We'll find out why and what the future of Ant looks like. Alright, so there's a big fat rumor that Andrew Yang is going to be the new US Secretary of Commerce. Now, this is major news for crypto due to the fact that Andrew has been a real progressive thinker in terms of technology, and in particular on crypto as well. And here's actually a pretty good quote on what Young thinks about crypto. Cryptocurrencies are seeing levels of fraud because of a lack of regulation. Other countries, which are ahead of us on the regulation, are leading in this new marketplace and dictating the rules that we'll need to follow once we catch up. So there's two things he's saying here. First, Andrew firmly believes in the power of crypto and understands that crypto, in order to live up to its potential, requires legislation, right? If you have no legislation, it's a wild west and scams exist and rip-offs exist and there's nothing to fall back on. At the same time, if you're not in charge of writing the regulations, somebody else is going to write them for you. So if the United States wants to be a progressive country and in part in charge of writing these rules and dictating what these rules are going to look like, then they'll have to be the ones writing the legislation. And as we've already seen, many of the regulatory rules that came in, like the allowance of banks to open up accounts for the holding of crypto and digital assets, have been major bullish items for crypto. So in short, Andrew Yang is good for crypto. This is a pretty interesting article I wanted to drop in here for you guys. So this fella, King Han Sol, is the son of a North Korean leader. Actually, he's the son of Kim Jong-un's brother. Remember the guy who was murdered by Kim Jong-un when Kim Jong-un took presidency? Now you can imagine if you are the son of a murdered man, you're probably going to be the target for the same reason, right? So, so far Kim Jong-un's young nephew has been living a life of luxury and relative safety. But now that he has come to learn that the safety is threatened, and as a result, he wanted to flee to the Netherlands for asylum. Now, just before boarding the plane, he was picked up by the CIA. Now, the article itself doesn't really provide much extra information, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the CIA picked him up to gather information on Kim Jong-un, his uncle, and in turn provide safety and asylum. Either way, whichever the case, the CIA picked up Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea's cousin, little cousin. And that's big in terms of geopolitical balance because providing asylum to someone you deem dangerous or someone that's deemed dangerous in order to get information that will be used against the president of, or should I say, dictator of North Korea, I can imagine Kim Jong un wouldn't be very happy to get with that. So, in terms of geopolitical balance between the States and North Korea, this is not a good move. But it does indicate that there's still a lot of things happening in this whole discussion around North Korea and the United States. It's a pretty interesting topic. I'll have to see how this develops over time. The undo button, Wallet 2 gives users the ability to reverse Ethereum transactions. This is fucking cool news. This time for Ethereum. As many of you know, one of the main critiques of crypto in general is the fact that transactions cannot be reversed. Although this is the case because blockchains are immutable, as in they cannot be reverse engineered, as they should be, there is a little gimmick that can be used to make transactions reversible, right? So the guys at Kirabo, I hope I pronounced that correctly, came up with this, and it's now available on MetaMask. So let me actually quote this because I don't want to butcher the way they described it. Um, Kirabo's announcement adds, the process for Ethereum is identical to that used in Bitcoin transactions. When dispatching a digital asset, a password is entered by the sender. Funds are released, but only if the recipient enters the same password. If the password is not entered, the sender can retrieve their assets at their convenience. So this is a pretty cool feature that demonstrates that, perceived drawbacks of using crypto can be circumvented with some clever thinking. How insane is this, guys? China has launched 6G satellites into orbit, or a 6G satellite into orbit. So, while the rest of the world is still trying to figure out 5G, China is already working on 6G. What I can tell you about 6G is that, surprise, it's faster than 5G. 6G, like 5G, makes use of terahertz waves, which have the same Achilles heel as 5G in the sense that water vapor, so water that's in the air, actually absorbs the waves. The way you can think about this is the way your microwave heats up water. Instead of the waves just passing out of your microwave, they're centered on the water vapor inside the microwave, and it makes the water molecules vibrate quicker, and that creates heat. 6G has the same limitations in the sense that if you send a 6G signal, water vapor is going to absorb some of that information, and you're not actually going to get all the information from A to B, so you'll actually get broken information, which is pretty much useless. So what the Chinese are doing up in space is testing 6G in the vacuum of space. There's no water molecules in space unless you happen to send through 6G signals through a meteorite. And they want to do this to see if the satellite works at all. Test it in the vacuum of space. If it works, then perfect. Second, they're going to send these 6G terahertz waves down to Earth, and to find out how much information is actually being received back on the ground, and see if they can modify the 6G in a way that they can actually increase the information payload. Personally, I'm pretty excited about this. I love new technology, and I love the fact that they're already trying out 6G before 5G is rolled out properly. It shows that they're really ahead of the game. I just pray that they don't fry anything or anyone along the way, because 6G is definitely going to be stronger than 5G. So let's hope they don't fry anyone's brain as they're trying this. The final part of today's newscast is actually one of the biggest items of the year, and that is China's President Xi Jinping, hope I'm not butchering that, personally scuttled Jack Ma's Ant IPO. As most of you know, Ant was supposed to IPO earlier in November. Unfortunately, Xi, the president of China, put a stop to this. Now, this on the surface is a pretty weird move by Xi, given the fact that China wants to build up its stock exchanges in retaliation for Trump putting extra controls on Chinese companies registered on US stock exchanges. So why on earth would you put a halt to potentially the biggest IPO in history? I mean, wouldn't this be awesome advertising and put China on the map in terms of stock exchanges? Well, Xi certainly didn't seem to think so. And let's dive in a little bit deeper and get a firmer understanding as to why Xi put a stop to this IPO. First, the first thing to note is the fact that Xi has been pretty intolerant of big business in China. Simply due to the fact that these businesses are perceived as a threat to Xi and the Communist Party by extension. Actually, let me quote this. Since Mr. Xi rose to power in late 2012, the government has taken action against some of the country's highest profile private conglomerates. Dalian Wanda's group Wang Jialin, once China's richest man, and Wu Xiaohu of Anbang Insurance Group are among prominent entrepreneurs who faced government crackdowns. Now, as a senior Chinese official said, what he cares about is what you do after you get rich and whether you're aligned your interest with that of the state. So in essence, it's about maintaining control for the Communist Party. So why, I hear you ask, is Ant such a threat to the Communist Party's rule? Well, the short answer to this question is that a ton of financial transaction volume is done through Alipay, which is a key component of Ant. Uh, Alipay is responsible for millions of loans. It operates a mutual fund and it sells all sorts of financial products. So, in short, it's a bank and more. Now, on top of that, it serves people that are not covered by traditional banks. And given the fact that it's not considered a bank, it has managed to evade a ton of regulations and capital requirements that other banks have to submit to. So it has a competitive advantage and it is a bank for people who were previously unbanked. So the Communist Party has tried to rein in Ant before. But given the fact that a ton of influential Chinese shareholders have unrealized profits in Ant, they did their best to keep Ant going strong. So what triggered C after all this time to get in after Ant personally? Well, let me reiterate. He made a genuine personal effort to stop this IPO. And why? Well, Jack Ma, Ant's president, gave a 20-minute speech in which he said that. Let me find the quote for you guys. Hold on, is it? Oh, yeah, here we go. There is no systemic risk in China's financial system, he said. Chinese finance has no system. That's the first one. He also took aim at the regulators, saying that they have only focused on risks and overlooked development. Jack Ma, accused big Chinese banks of harboring a pawn shop mentality that hurt a lot of entrepreneurs. Now, I also found, oh wait, yeah, so it's actually this pawn shop mentality that really triggered C, apparently. And this is really the reason. This is really the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, for C, it was the, what is it? Big tree that broke the camel's back to get after the Ant IPO. Now, I also found this pretty cool article. It's called Why Ant's Finance IPO Was Pulled. It's on valueinvesting.substack.com. I'll put the link to the article below. It's written by Aaron Peck. He's an independent journalist. So this article delves in a bit deeper into the whole IPO and the mechanics by which Ant functions. I highly recommend reading this article in detail. It's pretty fucking cool, but for those of you who don't have time, what it essentially comes down to is that Ant lends money to people. So these loans are sold, these loans are sold as clusters to investors, and these investors get tasty rates given the risk profile. You're lending to unbanked people, so that's pretty risky business. The trouble with this is the fact that Ant itself barely has to provide any liquidity, less than 1% of the actual loan. And instead, it functions as a prime reseller of the loans and barely takes any risk themselves. Why this is so troublesome is it's the same reason as how the 2008 crisis essentially got started. Here, loans on houses, aka mortgages, were clustered together and investors could invest in these loans for tasty rates. Eventually, however, the loans blew up. Investors went to shite and the whole bubble came crashing down. Banks went under, housing market prices collapsed, people lost their job, and the rest is history. So what it actually looks like is is trying to stop this from happening in China. Now, I'm kind of on the fence about this one, to be honest. I mean, I can see both sides of the story. On the one hand, C is trying to stop the Lehman debacle from happening again, and on the other side, you don't want to stifle innovation. So, without going into too much detail, Ant seems to be doing an exceptional job at keeping delinquencies low. That article here points that out too. Investors are happy and everyone's making a little bit of money. On the other hand, they are lumping together loans the same way Lehman did. And once these loans come cascading down, it's a waterfall scenario. So one triggers another, triggers another, triggers another. So I'd love to hear what you guys think on it. Are you pro or con IPO? Do you support C in this? Were you going to invest in this IPO to begin with? I'd love to hear you guys your stance on it. So drop it down in the comments below, and I'd love to engage.